Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below and it'll give you a pretty good overview of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. But in short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But today is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. So we don't do that. Instead, I take a recommendation from you guys, something that you've left in the comments to one of the other videos, something that I haven't seen before. Check it out. And then I'll let you know, is it syllabus-worthy? Did I like it enough that I would have tried to put it on the Horror Movie Syllabus? And today, the movie that we're looking at is Monsters of Man. Monsters of Man was recommended by the One Man Crew, and they recommended it when we were looking at A Dark Place, which was another Is It Syllabus-Worthy video that we did, that if I recall correctly, was also recommended by the One Man Crew. And we wound up liking A Dark Place quite a bit. It was a pretty subtle kind of psychological horror thing that, go check out that video if you haven't seen it. But I really liked that movie. I thought it was really underrated. So already I've kind of got some goodwill towards this one because of it being recommended in that one. And the only thing that the One Man Crew told me about this movie is that it's kind of a sci-fi movie. So that kind of manages expectations a little bit. From that, I'm kind of thinking not only sci-fi, but probably a little lighter on the horror. So I'm kind of going in with that knowledge, but that's it. No trailers, no reading a synopsis, nothing. Just going in blind. Just enough information to make sure I've got the right movie and then diving right in. And that's exactly what I did. And was the water warm when I dove in? Did I enjoy it? Well, let's find out. Once again, the movie that we're looking at is Monsters of Man. Monsters of Man came out in 2020 and was directed by a man named Mark Toia, who, this was his only feature credit when I looked into him. He had done a couple of small projects. This is the only feature thing he had done, and sadly he died last year in 2023, and of some undisclosed illness as far as I could tell. Kind of seemed a little young and a little tragic, I guess. So this is the only work of his to really judge. I hadn't seen anything else he had done, and probably nobody else really has either. It's pretty small stuff. So this is it, and apparently this was a crowdsourced movie. From what I could find, this movie seems to have been crowdsourced, although I couldn't get a lot of details about the actual crowdsourcing activity, the campaign. But this seems to be a movie that was demanded for and paid for by fans, so that's pretty cool. And if you haven't seen it like I hadn't, the movie is about a robotics company that's got some state-of-the-art robots that have military applications, and the CIA has asked them to do a demonstration, which actually winds up being a covert operation in Southeast Asia to eradicate some heroin dealers. Unbeknownst to everybody, the area is being inhabited by an ex-Navy SEAL and a group of doctors on a humanitarian mission. So there are Americans there, there are witnesses there to see these robots doing this off-the-books black ops operation, and hijinks abound as they tend to do, and things go sideways. But we'll stop there so as to not spoil the movie for anybody. But the movie is interesting because it's clearly kind of low budget, and again, the crowdsourcing kind of illuminates that a little bit. But for a low-budget movie, damn if it doesn't look really good, and it's got Neil McDonough in it, which is not for nothing. Neil McDonough not exactly a huge star, but he's a very recognizable face, pops up in a lot of mainstream, big-budget type movies. So they spent some money to get him in here. Now, they didn't use him as much as you would think, so there's some budget issues to address there, and that one we'll get to that in just a minute. But it was the first thing that I noticed about the movie is that the quality of it actually looks pretty darn good. And then the second thing I noticed was the runtime. It's like 2 hours and 11 minutes. It's over 2 hours long. And that was a surprise to me, especially for a crowdfunded movie. I kind of opened my eyes a little bit when I saw the runtime. I was like, that's going to be a challenge. And it was. And that was the first thing about this movie that was a challenge for me as a viewer, was the runtime. And not just the runtime itself, because me, if a movie is long, but it uses that runtime well, I'm cool with that. I don't mind a movie being as long as it needs to be. The question was, did this movie need to be over 2 hours long? And the answer is no, it didn't. And right off the bat that it's going to be a challenge, because the first 10 minutes introduced us to 12 different characters. And you can tell off the bat that some of them are pretty disposable and probably meant to be cannon fodder, just like a slasher movie. But there's so much going on in the first 10 minutes of this movie, and they're setting up all these characters, all of which are bland to unlikable. bland at best, unlikable at worst. Like there's some characters you just kind of hate right off the bat. And mind you, I think you're supposed to hate them. I think they're supposed to be unlikable characters. But one of the byproducts of so many characters being introduced so quickly is that I'm not entirely clear who I'm supposed to be rooting for, who's like my protagonist, who's my main character. And it's because I don't think the movie really knows either. It sets up a lot of disparate stories to follow and a lot of characters to dig into. And it actually tries to do all this, which is where you start to get the explanation for the runtime. But it's a little unfocused. It's a lot unfocused, and it's a bit of a challenge. Now, I want to be clear. I had no problems with the actors. By and large, they were decent to fine or passable to fine. Nobody, with the exception of the little kid, and I don't want to beat up on a little kid, but with the exception of the little kid, everybody's doing perfectly fine work to actually decent work. Nobody's amazing. Nobody's going to win an Oscar here, but I don't think anybody really embarrassed themselves either. The dialogue's not great, so there's that. But the actors are doing a fine job, and Neil McDonough, of course, is good. He's a good actor. He's off by himself. Every single scene, he's by himself. He's basically interacting with telephone and computer, and that's it, and just kind of getting mad about things while he's being kept up to date and giving orders over the phone and stuff. And my guess for that is they had enough money to hire Neil McDonough, but not enough for him to actually come out on set and interact with the rest of the actors. So he gets all his scenes like solo by himself, but he's still a welcome presence here. And everybody else, again, doing perfectly fine. It's just there's too many characters, and none of them are tremendously interesting. Now, for an action sci-fi horror movie, which is what this is, that's not necessarily a big problem. You don't necessarily need to have super great characters. Again, cannon fodder is perfectly fine. The problem here is this movie wants you to care about some of these characters. It wants you to really invest in some of the dramatic moments and character beats that are in this movie, and they don't hit. They kind of fall flat. There's the scene where the kid loses his father and he's just crying and it's really dramatic and he's just, wailing. And first of all, he's not really selling the moment because he's not a great actor. And secondly, it just goes on. It goes on for a really, really long time, like almost comically. So I actually was starting to find it funny because he's crying like, no, we got to go. And then he's crying like, no, we got to go. And he's still crying. And it went on so long that it started to feel like a bit. There's the scene with this woman who's being forced to do the robotics test, and she winds up getting away for a little while, and she's on the phone with a loved one, presumably a boyfriend or a friend or something like that, and then she gets attacked, and then there's this whole thing about they got to close all the loose ends, so they've also got to go and attack the person she was calling, and there's a whole scene with that, and it's just it's a bit much because I don't care about the woman on the phone, much less the person she called. But we're gonna spend like 5-10 minutes on just that. There's a scene where a character is contemplating suicide, and it's supposed to be really, really dramatic. And I found myself not really caring because I don't like the character, and I don't think you're supposed to. And I think this was supposed to be like the redemption moment for this character. Didn't work because I could have cared less if he committed suicide or not. I realized right there as he's contemplating, I'm like, I don't really care which way he goes with this, and that's a problem. The movie wanted me to care. The movie wants these moments to be impactful, and they're not. I just want to get back to the action scenes because the action scenes are pretty good, if a bit repetitive. A lot of the action scenes, in particular earlier on in the movie, are, there's some shooting and everybody has to take cover. And then there's some more shooting and everybody has to take cover. And then there's some shooting and everybody has to take cover. And there's a lot of that going on. So it's a lot of rinse and repeat kind of thing going on. But the movie action does get a little bit better as time goes on. And it's really good because the robots are actually really good. And like I said earlier, the movie looks good. And one of the things that surprisingly looks good are these robots. They're I believe mostly CGI, if not completely CGI, and they are suitably good. They're not amazing. It's not like watching Avatar or something like that, but it's really, really good considering this is a crowdfunded movie. And they are pretty scary looking. They're pretty creepy. They move like soldiers, and they have like this kind of faceless like android thing, and they're dark, and they're a good antagonist. They really are, and they're violent. And this is some of the best stuff about the movie. This is the stuff that managed to keep me engaged because I was tuning out pretty early on. Like the first half hour of this movie, I was really struggling because I just didn't care about anybody who was on screen. But when the robots kick in, I started picking up, especially because they are pretty gory and tough and brutal. And they do have an opening scene with them that gets cut short, and it's like, and then 48 hours earlier and all that. And so I was just like waiting for this roast to show up. But when they did, they didn't disappoint. They are good, and they not for nothing, they kill children. They're not really pulling punches with this movie, which I think is part of the benefit of being crowdsourced. You can kind of do what you want to do. Hey, kids die, that's pretty brutal, and it's not totally gruesome, like it's not super graphic, but considering again the budget and everything, I thought the gore that was on screen was pretty good. The violence was pretty good, and then when you have the robots fighting each other, and I don't want to go too much into the plot, but at one point robot versus robot comes up, and that's a real highlight. I wanted more of that, frankly. There's some in there, but I wanted more. That's where it was really cool, because those action scenes were really, really good. The rest of the action was hit and miss. Like I said, early on, it got a little repetitive. Later on, it started getting a little bit better, a little bit more interesting. But it's a victim of what is the biggest culprit or biggest problem with the movie, which is a mediocre script. It's not a bad script. It's just, it's got fat on it, and it's got a bunch of characters that are not really developed really well. Too many characters with too many plots, and not very good dialogue. The dialogue's not horrible. It's just kind of trite. The motivations of many of the characters are just kind of hard to follow. Like, why are some of these people doing the things that they're doing? It's not super clear. They want us to care about these characters. We don't. And all I can think is a lot of the money was going towards special effects and not to the script. And to a degree, that might have actually been the right call. That might have actually been wise, because the special effects look good. And I think that's why people were coming to this movie. I think that's why people crowdfunded the movie. I don't think they were crowdfunding it to see a really good drama. They wanted to see some robot action. And the movie does deliver on the robot action. And it even has a pretty interesting storyline for the robot. And again, I don't want to get too into the details and spoil it, but even the robot has, some kind of self-awareness concept that starts out pretty early in the movie. But it doesn't really take off and doesn't really take center stage until too late. It's probably the most interesting subplot, if you will, to follow. But they kind of introduce it early, but then they don't do anything with it for a while. And then, towards the end, it kind of really starts to take center stage, and it's a little too little too late. But it's unfortunate, because that's some good stuff. So really, a tighter script, a little bit more attention paid on tighter script, or maybe drop like half the doctors. You don't need 6 of them. Maybe just tighten these up a little bit. Maybe not have 3 computer experts. Maybe just have 2. Cut some of these extraneous plots, these extraneous scenes, cut down some of the moments, cut down some of the repetition in the action, and cut out about 30 to 45 minutes of this movie. At an hour 40 or so, nice and lean, this movie's probably a lot of fun. It probably moves really well. Now, that said, it didn't feel slow. It just felt repetitious, and like I just kind of asked myself, why am I supposed to care about these things? Stuff was going on, but it just wasn't stuff that was really moving me, and it was supposed to be moving me. So that's the thing. Tighter script. I think tighter script really would have sold this one to me, but it winds up leaving a lot on the table, and kind of just trying. It's almost like they didn't want to kill their darlings. They wanted to give everybody a good moment, and that was maybe a mistake. And so, but was it enough of a mistake to keep it off the horror movie syllabus? Well, let's find out. So, does Monsters of Man make it on the horror movie syllabus? No, of course not. There is some good in this movie, in particular the robot stuff is good, and some of the characters are okay, but the good doesn't outweigh the tedious. And I say the tedious, not the bad, because there's not a lot of bad here. It's just a lot of tediousness. And that's actually almost a little bit of a problem, because if the movie was worse, if there was more bad stuff in it, it might be it's so bad it's good, something I can laugh at. But there's nothing really to laugh at here. It's not, it's not, nobody's embarrassing themselves. There's nothing terrible or comical about it. It's not like Ghost Shark or something like that, where you're having a really good time laughing at the bad acting. No, this is actually perfectly fine, but it's mediocre, and that's the problem. Is that it's just mediocre. There's a couple of standout cool scenes, in particular the robot stuff is really, really good, but the rest of it is just kind of there, just kind of sits there and doesn't do much, and it just, you kind of find yourself looking at your watch, and again, it took about 30 minutes for the robot action to really kick in, and it was really a slog until that point, like really a slog, and then it didn't ever stopped being a slog. It just stopped feeling as much of a chore to watch it. Once the robots were in there, there was enough in there to keep the blood flowing, keep me awake. But, it still never got great. It never picked up and got great. And not for nothing, the movie isn't really horror, like we talked about at the beginning of the video. Kind of expected it to not be really horror. It's really more like sci-fi and action, like the One Man Crew said. But it does have enough gore and like tension in there that I'd give it a pass as a horror. I wouldn't use that as a reason to keep it off the syllabus. It's just, again, there's just nothing about it that stood out enough to muscle its way into like a horror action selection for the syllabus, or even an extra credit. Really, it's just not there. And it really did need to be about 30-40 minutes shorter. And I think it would have been super easy to cut it. Like at some point when I was watching it, maybe about an hour or so in, my brain started looking at scenes and going, this could be shorter, this could be cut. Like the editor in me started looking at it going, here's where I'd make these tweaks, and you would lose very little to nothing of the story and be fine. And you just have a nice lean movie. Cut a couple of the characters out. Again, some of those doctors are extraneous. They're just there to get killed, and I get it. And some of the kill scenes are actually pretty good, but they want us to feel certain things. We didn't feel them. Cut those characters. Cut them. This movie could have been salvaged with a better script. Or I shouldn't say salvaged. It could have been improved with a better script. But could have possibly been salvaged with a pair of scissors. Like, even if you had this mediocre script, get a really strong editor in there and just start making the tough cuts. Kill your darlings. I think you would have had a leaner, better, funner movie to work with. But alas, that's not what we got. We got this one a little bit bloated, a little bit tedious, not bad, but I can't in good conscience tell you got to check it out. I don't think you'd have a horrible time, but it'd be a lot of your time. And so that's kind of my ding on it. And it's a big one. So not going to make the syllabus, but I didn't hate myself for watching it, but it wasn't one of my favorites. It was a bit of a chore. But that's going to do it for our review and look at Monsters of Man. Like I said, it's a little bit of a chore. It wasn't my finest favorite movie, but I'm not mad at One Man Crew for doing the recommendation, and implore all of you to do more of them, because by and large, if this is as bad as it gets, and it hasn't, by the way, this is not the worst movie we've watched on the channel by far, but you guys are doing really good with the recommendations. Overall, pretty pleased with that. Pretty happy to keep doing this series, because the stuff I'm seeing is mostly good to great. And this one was merely, That's as bad as it got. Cool. So that's it for this. And it's not it for the video, though, because let's go ahead and look at a horror Trivial Pursuit card before we go. And because Monsters of Man is it's not a foreign film, but it does take place internationally. It does take place in Southeast Asia. Let's go ahead and do the international category on the card, because we haven't done that in a while. So let's just do that one. Okay, here's the question. Who directed 2001's The Devil's Backbone? Y'all, I know this one. We've talked about The Devil's Backbone. Great film, by the way. One of the lesser known films of this rather well-known horror director. And I think a lot of people haven't seen this one because this one is not in English, hence the international category on the card. But it's a great film, shot beautifully, because that is the trademark of this director. I guess I'm giving some clues here. But an underrated film, because not so much because of the film not getting its due, more that, again, American audiences probably haven't seen it very much, and they haven't, or they're distracted by, or the other ones in this director's oeuvre outshine it. Some of the other movies this director made have gotten much more press, much more popularity, and so they are the ones that get the shine, if you will, and this one kind of gets, kind of forgotten about, maybe. It's an earlier film. I can't remember if it's this director's first film, but it is an earlier film. I don't think it's his first film. No, it's not. It's definitely not his first film, but it's an earlier film. And it's very, very good. We have talked about most, if not all, of this director's movies. And another hint for you there. Really like this director. This director is very, very popular. Visionary director. And I mean that in terms of visuals. The vision of this director is just gorgeous. And I feel like I'm prattling on just to give you some time, because I 100% know the answer to this question. So I'm going to let you guys wrap it up. Lock in your answers. You got to guess, but think international. And lock in your answer, because we're going to go ahead and answer. I'm going to give my answer first. My answer, of course, is Guillermo del Toro, who directed Devil's Backbone. We'll double check the card. Guillermo del Toro. Yeah, like this one was easy for me because I'm a Del Toro fan. We talked about Devil's Backbone. Really, really like that movie. It's really good. I think it's one of his better ones, frankly. And yeah, he makes gorgeous movies. We've talked about. I can't think if there's the one that I don't remember. Did we talk about Shape of Water, or was I just thinking we were going to talk about Shape of Water? That's the only one I can think of that maybe we haven't, or the newest one. I'm blanking out the name because I haven't seen it yet. The one that was nominated for an Oscar like 2 years ago. Anyways, off topic. Guillermo del Toro, did you get the answer right? If you're not, who did you guess? Who did you guess? Did you guess Alfonso Cuarón? Because that'd be kind of cool. but anyways, let me know who you guessed in the comments below. Let me know what other cool movies to check out that might be fun. Stuff that's less than 2 hours long. Actually, doesn't matter. However long it is, just give me your good recommendations for movies to check out, and maybe we'll add them to the list, and we'll see if we can make a video about them. But until then, I'm just going to say,